70 and 80 million views.
You could have 500 followers. You could put out one piece of content and overnight 4 million people could see it. Take the risk or lose the chance. Stay small enough, long enough, and you'll be big enough soon enough.
To the younger generation, we're doing a public service.
Credibility kills all bad attitudes.
Hey everybody, it's me, the Einstein of Wall Street, here from the bowels of the New York Stock Exchange. This is the most iconic financial institution in the world, and I feel really, really honored to be able to be here to do an interview with somebody who, in my opinion, is one of the most extraordinary young gentlemen in social media, somebody who has really sort of broken down incredible barriers. Look, we're in a building that, it's funny. I've been here for 41 years. I just celebrated 41 years in this building. March 28th, 1985 was when I started. And as I look around the room and I look around this, this place that I've come to for the last, 41 years, it talks about money. It talks about capitalism. It talks about wealth. It talks about legacy, and it's, if I could go back and really share the history that I have experienced, I'm probably the only person who is still trading now, who was around back in the day of the open outcry, in the back of this sort of elegant wealth, that started going back in the 1700s. Anyway, just to break into it, I'm here with James DeMoulin, who is known as the School of Hard Knocks. He has one of the greatest, the largest, fastest growing social media channels, in history, really. And I just wanted to welcome you to the Stock Exchange and my podcast.
Thank you for having me out, my friend. And you're one of the most viewed interviews on the School of Hard Knocks. So
I know.
It's great to be here with you, my friend.
Thank you so much. It's funny when we met and we actually did our first interview. I think you had just done, Gary Vaynerchuk and Tom Brady and stuff,
yeah.
and I had sort of come onto the scene and sort of blown up myself in those 11 months. And I was I don't usually go back and watch a lot of things that I'm on and whatnot, but for some reason, and I rarely ever will read comments. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, I was just moved by so many of the comments supporting you, supporting me, because, what we do, we're doing a public service, right? In so many ways. I mean, it's all about information, education, motivation, to the younger generation. That's your message, right? And so when I saw, I started watching the numbers build and to see like Gary and Tom, and look, trust me, I am by far not as well known as them, as famous as them, but to see them get 7 and 10 million views, and then me get 70 and 80 million views, for me, what's exciting is how the audience is moved by what you do and what I do, mm-hmm. right? That's what matters, right?
And the message obviously resonated with them a lot.
It did, I love that because look, what you do is so powerful. Look, at the end of the day, social media is a funny thing, right? We can go out there and sort of brag about the money we've made, and I always joke about it. It's a lie on the back of a Bugatti showing stacks of $10,000 bills and brag, but if you're lucky enough to have built a platform, it's a matter of what you do with that platform, and you worked really hard, and it surely doesn't come easy. It takes really, really hard work, but it's a matter of what you do with that platform. And I beg everyone to please go out there and look at School of Hard Knocks and follow James and see, because you've interviewed. Let's go back in. Give me a little breakdown on how it started and the beginnings of it.
Yeah, I was going to the University of Texas in Austin. I was a freshman in college and just saw a huge opportunity in the creator economy. It was a multi-$100 billion industry at the time. And prior to going to school out in Austin at the University of Texas, I had discovered TikTok in like 2019, 2020. And I saw it as this platform where you could have 500 followers. You could put out one piece of content and overnight 4 million people could see it. Nothing like that really existed prior to TikTok. But then obviously as TikTok grew and became very popular and overtook Google as the #1 search engine, then Instagram adopted Reels, and all these other platforms started to kind of emulate TikTok's very powerful algorithm. But eventually, again, I was going to the University of Texas, saw a big opportunity in the creator economy. And I just had a passion for business. And so I started the channel with my brother and a childhood friend. It was the three of us. And, ultimately it started initially with just us three making content about business. We weren't even doing interviews at the beginning.
We weren't doing interviews.
No.
Okay.
Interviews probably wasn't until like the 7th or 8th type of content that we tried, there's an important lesson right there that you have to pivot no matter what type of business that you go into. I just interviewed Arthur Blank, who's the founder of Home Depot. He's worth, billions of dollars. And I'm actually posting his interview today. But one of the things as I I was editing his video, is he was talking about business markets, everything moves so quickly. You have to know how to pivot, which is what we did with the content. We're like, hey, us trying to be the ones to give the advice wasn't really resonating. So then as soon as we started to do the interviews, just the consistency of how well they did. And we started in 2021. We're in 2026 now. Channels over 22 million followers across all platforms. We've interviewed 48 or 49 billionaires to this point, and some remarkable people. And we've built an 8-figure business out of it as well, which is the other great thing, because a lot of content creators, unfortunately, they struggle with the monetization.
Correct. It's a challenge. It is. It really is.
One of my favorite sayings is that great businessmen are terrible content creators and great content creators are terrible businessmen. And that's unfortunately the truth. Like a lot of influencers I know, they're unfortunately broke because, you can be a creative, but if you don't have that business prowess, it's not as easy as people think.
And it's a formula. It's in a formula. So when did you become a billionaire, sir? When did you become a millionaire, sir?
23 years old this last year.
23 years old.
Yeah, definitely.
And then give me a little background on you growing up or whatnot. I mean, was business a part of your background? What was your family like growing up?
My dad was a West Pointer, so he went to school a couple hours from here in upstate New York. He was in the military for 31 years, had an incredible career. He ran the largest overseas military base in the entire world in Camp Humphreys in South Korea. My mom, first of all, I'll say this, like my mom and dad are like the most incredible, amazing people. They both instilled so many, they just both instilled so many great values in my brother and I, and we wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for them. Again, mom was in healthcare for a bit. Dad was in the military his whole career, and he really had an incredible career. Ended up retiring as a colonel, but not a business background by any sense. But they instilled those principles of discipline in my brother and I. My brother was the one that got me going into business. This probably isn't going to make a lot of sense to you or anybody without like pulling it up in front of you, but my brother actually won a Microsoft Excel World Championship. I don't know if you're familiar how Microsoft does those world competitions. No, he beat 2 million people in a world championship using Microsoft Excel. It sounds crazy. Look it up. Look up CNN, John Dumoulin. You'll see the articles and it'll explain it all for you. But anyways, when that happened, he became valuable to businesses. Yeah. And so then he had all these big companies reaching out to him, and he learned that I have to protect myself as a young guy in business. Well, he had all these opportunities flowing to him. So when I was exposed to that and saw that, then my mind kind of flipped and I was like, I want to be a businessman. I didn't know what it was going to be at the time. I didn't know that it would be through content in the media business, but here we are today.
It's all about value, right? That's what you add. We add value to the situation. Like there are a lot of people who, as you said, put out content just for the sake of content. Mm-hmm. I would say probably 2% of people who are doing, who are part of the creative economy are monetizing it. Sure. And it is a challenge. And I love the fact that you've been able to do that and you sort of are fulfilling your prophecy in that way. What's exciting is, it's funny how people look up to people who have money, right? I mean, and money is sort of a funny thing, right? Yeah. I did not grow up, I grew up comfortable. I grew up upper middle class. My parents are Holocaust survivors. They came here in 1949, fell in love. My father was a doctor. My mother was his secretary, and they worked really hard. And so, their relationship with money, it was not a big part of their life. I did have a mentor, though. I had a mentor who was my older brother, who my father had adopted during the war, and his parents had been killed in one of the uprisings during the war, and he came to the United States. He was sent to at the end of the war, the United States let in one boat of refugee children. All right. Back then, it cost $50,000 to get it. They allowed 40,000 children into the United States after the war. My grandfather was a very wealthy man before the war. He was the CEO of Suchard Chocolate, which is one of the largest chocolate companies in the world. So after the war, he had money hidden. And so he paid for this young man who my father and my grandfather had adopted during the war. He was 8 years old when his parents were killed. Sent him to America. He ended up getting foster parents. And then when my mother and father met and they came to the States, he came to live with them. He went on to become a incredibly wealthy man in the oil business and in the stock business. So he was my mentor. Mentors are so important. You are interviewing billionaires and millionaires, and not every one of them is mentor material. Like, tell me about your mentors besides your father. I know.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, the way that I look at it as, my two partners and I have gotten very clear with each other, which is where do we want to go? Where do we want to invest our money? Where do we want to take our business? And we try to just surround ourselves with people that, not only that they can necessarily add value to us, but where can we also add value to other people? Because that's the way that I look at relationships, right? I don't look at relationships anyway as like a transaction, but at the same time, it's like I'm always a very big proponent of like, how can I add value first to as many people as possible? I know a lot of very successful people, for example, like Michael Rubin, somebody who's an amazing dude, preaches this idea of like not being afraid to ask for help. But like, I also want to ask for help after I've already provided somebody an immense amount of value. And so in my case, I mean, just two people off the top of my mind, a great friend of mine who's also become a mentor is a gentleman named Ani Adenukwe. I just bought my first piece of commercial real estate with him up in Ohio State University, and runs an incredible business. He owns the second largest sun spa tanning franchise in all of America. He started it when he was in school, and he's become an amazing mentor, in particular instilling a principle, of recurring revenue being a very important aspect to many businesses. Another gentleman, his name is Todd Napola, who's he owns a lot of the commercial strips and shopping centers in South Florida up near Hollywood. And so he's also become an awesome mentor of mine. But I mean, I think a lot of these people that I'm getting to connect with and meet with, I try and build a relationship more than just like a one-off interaction. That's why I'm always looking for different ways to add value. And hey, maybe that there's something that we do together now. Maybe it's 5 years from now. Maybe it's 10 years from now. I mean, who knows? We'll keep in touch. And if there's ever anywhere I can help, I can always help out as well.
I love that. It's very funny. I want to tell you a little funny story, because one of the things, as prominent people as we are, and people are recognized on the street, which is an incredibly exciting thing, right? I'm enjoying it, right? And as I said, it's a matter of what you do with that platform. And so I have so many opportunities, as do you, having built these platforms you do. But I think it is because of you, because I know that you talk about, when you end your interviews, the last thing you always say to everybody is, can I have your contact information? Right? And it's not only you, but a number of other people. People will come up to me on the subway, on the street, on a plane, and they won't introduce themselves. They won't say anything except, can I get a picture with you? And they'll take a picture and walk away. And and I'm sort of, I always sort of smirk and smile about it, because at the end of the day, that does nothing for anybody, right? And so I always talk about how important it is to make that connection. Right? It's all about the bridge. I'm known as the connector. I love putting people together. I love sharing the wealth, sharing the information, sharing the value and the experience. And so I gave a talk at a thing called Summer Discovery. There's a
I spoke with one of
Did you? Okay. So I'm doing some wonderful things with them this year. I'm going to be I set up a number of trading courses with them. But I was giving my talk, and I said to everybody, I said, look, when you meet, life is it's a journey, right? It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so when you are out there meeting people, right, put your hand out, introduce yourselves, right? Make every experience, take advantage of every experience that they could potentially be a lasting thing that could add to your life and add. Once again, we're all talking about value. I said, never walk away from a situation without asking for contact information. So we finished my talk, and there were NFL players there and all these other people. And this was high school students who had came to this event. It was in New York a few weeks ago. And it was a line of like 1,000 kids who wanted to take a picture with me and whatever. And I had made that comment. I talked about you, and I said how you should never walk away from a situation without asking for your contact information. And every one of them said, when they walked away from me before they left, they said, can I get your contact information? I gave my number. I made such a mistake because I gave my number out to 3,500 15-year-olds. Wow. And I'm going, what did I do that for? But it's okay. It's all good. As far as all the people who you've interviewed, look, you've interviewed some of the greatest millionaires and billionaires. And we know that not everybody who makes money has the ability to really add value and to share their experience. Because look, do I ask, I think Mark Cuban was one of your great interviews. It was pivotal for you. But I think it's important for people to also know that, I don't get financial advice from Mark Cuban. I mean, there are things that everybody in different levels of entrepreneurship have to offer, right? Us all. And so let's go back. Let's pick out 5 of your favorite interviews where you've really felt that it's been life-changing for you.
Love that. I'll give you a couple off the top of my head. For starters, we'll start a little bit more from like a mindset perspective. Will Smith. Everybody knows Will Smith, The Pursuit of Happiness, amazing actor. In my interview with Will Smith, one of the things he talked about was that taking advice from people that have not done the thing that you want to do makes you, like, it is insanity. Like, taking advice from people that you would not trade places with is crazy. And so oftentimes people get a perspective from a friend or a parent and somebody that's kind of talking down and not pouring life into them because that person can't see that for themselves. So I think that one with Will Smith definitely resonates a lot with me. There was another one.
Well, let me ask you a question, though, because we think of Pursuit of Happiness, and look, that is not his experience, right?
Sure.
Like, that was a movie he made.
Definitely.
But I think anybody, I mean, I watched that movie, and it's, look, I think we've all, and I'll ask you that question a little later down the road, but is, there as we go along, we've talked about it, you and I, how we learn so much more from failure than we do from success. And there are going to be those times where you're at your lowest, right? And that you really kind of got to dig into your spirit, and talk to God. And we know we both are big believers in God and how that's curated our lives. But anyway, go ahead. I sort of, I deviate?
Yeah. So first things first, like, never take advice from someone that you would not trade places with. The second thing was, I remember, not a super well-known person, but his name was D.L. Woods. And I interviewed him when he was in a Rolls Royce culling and out in Houston, Texas. And he said this quote to me: "Stay small enough, long enough, and you'll be big enough soon enough." And I love that quote because what happens so often, especially with my generation now, and we've talked about this and you've talked about this on your platform, is we all have that instant gratification that we think it comes overnight. When in reality, it's that if you can just, for a couple years, reinvest back into your company, be smart with the initial profits, don't go buy dumb stuff, and you stay lean and you build a good company, it's going to take care of itself. But so often is people have one good week, one good month, and they go out and blow it and buy something dumb. But what happens if the next month isn't good, or you lose a big client that you had? Like, stay small enough, long enough, and you'll be big enough soon enough. I think that's very important. Another one that I love, I was in Philadelphia and I cold approached this gentleman. He was a filmmaker. He made $35 million in a year. And one of the things that he said was, when you're born, you look like your parents, but when you die, you look like your decisions.
Right. I love it. It's one of your great lines. It's a great line. Yeah.
That's a good one right there. From a more business, from a financial standpoint, I love this idea of concentration builds wealth, diversification keeps it. And I've seen that even in our case with the School of Hard Knocks and our businesses now, is like, we concentrated so hard and long in the media business to grow to 20 million followers. We built different verticals that are direct businesses that make a lot of sense for our content, that have done well. And now that money's gone into real estate, and we've bought into investment properties, and we're continuing to scale, and we're continuing to, just build out our distribution even more. And so concentration builds wealth, diversification keeps it. It is like a very important thing to me.
We always, I always talk about investing in stocks and not stuff. I mean, just now we're here at the stock exchange. We have, these are candlestick charts, right? Do you know anything about the stock market?
Yeah, I do.
You do? Okay. Are you invested in the stock market?
I am in the stock market.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm proud of
Thanks
you.
Thanks to you, right? Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
But let's go back. I mean, some of your great, I love the fact, because it's funny, they're well-known millionaires and billionaires. We know them all, like the Shark Tank guys, obviously, and I know most of them well. Damon John was on the floor a couple of weeks ago. He and I are going to be doing a financial literacy initiative together, and I'm really excited about that. Just basically bringing. Do you know about the NIL thing?
Familiar.
Okay, so everybody should know that, right? That now high school and college students who are going to be either go pro or are already playing are able to now receive money, right? And we also know that most people who are young and are talented and who are given a whole bunch of money really don't necessarily know what to do with it. And most people, first of all, only about 1% of them do end up going pro, right? And so, that whole idea that now that they're being given money, that if we were able to educate them enough to know what to do with that money, because, yes, are a few of them going to go on and make $40 million for 25 years ahead? Absolutely. But a majority of them are not. Right. And so if there is this little sort of short microcosm of time where they're going to make some money, to be able to educate them in a way that money is going to be able to grow, because you've learned that many times. I know so many of the interviews you asked, you know what I love? You just earlier mentioned about pivoting, right? And I think that is one of your masteries, right? Look, everybody does interviews, right? There's a podcast or a dime a dozen at the moment. It is a hot topic, though. I know we are now seeing a number of. There's a company that works with the stock exchange called TBFN. It's a podcast media company that just got bought by OpenAI for $300 million, right? And which is amazing. So content is gold right now, right? And it's so you're building it, I'm building it, and it's so nice to be able to have all that inventory.
And also, like, just one thing as well is like, this is the best time to do it because people don't realize this. Like, you've built the platform with several million followers. You know, obviously Hard Knocks is a big platform, but for people that are watching, like, if you don't understand that now is the time to do it because it's going to get incredibly harder with, AI. And the reason why I don't think people understand this is because, like, when I started doing TikTok in 2019, it wasn't really that saturated. You could put out anything. You know, we could throw the water bottle off the table and it would go viral and get a million views, right? But whereas now it's just like there's so much competition and saturation that you genuinely have to be putting out such great, consistent content. Otherwise, it's going to be hard to go viral. So it's like you do it now before, because with AI, when typically if me and you upload one piece of content, there's going to be people uploading 20,000 pieces of content at once, which is like ridiculous.
What is your opinion of AI?
I mean, obviously, I think that I have, mixed opinions. For starters, I wouldn't even say I'm the most AI savvy person. We use it across all of our companies to help speed up efficiencies and a lot of time on different things, right? And we build it out to help with, just various things within the company. But I also feel like you can't get rid of the human element. You can tell when you take the creativity out of the human creativity out of something. And that doesn't take away from the fact that you can get amazing inspiration and a catalog and an array of ideas from AI. But the minute you just start relying on it for absolutely everything, you can see through it. And it takes the authenticity out of things. And it just like, so I would just say proceed with caution when it comes to like how much you do use it and leverage it. Save time, efficiency, save money, but like just be very mindful that, hey, the human element is still very important and is one of the things that ultimately makes people buy in business.
Look, that's my biggest message is the human element. How we here at the stock exchange, right? We are the only human-based marketplace in the world, and one of my main goals is to keep that legacy going as long as I can. I mentioned to you that we're doing they made a statue of me, which is kind of crazy for somebody who's still alive. Most times statues are made. And it's going to be a tribute to the broker, right? What differentiates us on the floor of the stock exchange, and I've told you this when I've explained to you about the floor, we differentiated from NASDAQ and the other markets, is the human element of it, is the broker, right? The history of the broker on the floor of the stock exchange, it goes back to 1650, right? There was a tree outside of this building before it was built called the Buttonwood tree, and there we used to be 26 brokers, self-claimed brokers in 1650 who used to sit there with wheelbarrows and would go down to the port, and collect commodities and things that would come in on ships, and then they would come and wheel and deal them outside. That human element is an extraordinary thing. When you interview people, what's incredible about you is, I started to say that, is your ability to pivot on questions, right? There's nothing cookie cutter about your interviews. You although you ask very similar questions because you have a goal, but it's amazing how you're able to ask it in a way that each time you do it, it feels like it's the first time that you ask that question. I mean, talk about your journey on that, because it's not easy. I did not. I started out as a broker. My journey here, I spent many years. First of all, before I it was only till this last year that I became a millionaire, right? And I'm an old millionaire, but doing interviews and actually being able to, we're living in a world where social media is separating us and disengaging us. And you are kind of bringing people together, your ability to, and I love your persistence, the way you do it. I mean, everybody should just watch it. I mean, I could sit there and scroll through your videos just because, of your expertise at getting things. What makes a good interviewer is what you're able to get out of the person you're talking to.
Right.
You can just ask questions, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. That's not a big deal. But you're able to get them to talk about the real stuff. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I love that you asked that. And, you were talking a little bit earlier about how when people come up to you and all they do is ask for a picture, right, and vice versa, right? Like, they're missing a huge opportunity there, right? Because I think one of the greatest skill sets that people can possess in today's world is the ability to ask really good questions. Yeah. If you can ask great questions to people and you're very intentional about the questions you ask, and first of all, people recognize that. If somebody asks you a good question, even if you're in a rush or you're not having a great day,
you're going to stop.
You're going to pour into them because you're like, you know what, that's a really good question. At least that's how I feel about it, right?
Yeah, you're right, 100%.
In regards to becoming a great question asker, the thing that I've done and what I've realized is like a lot of people might think that, hey, you've got these big interviews set up. Like, how much time are you pouring into the thought process of coming up with great questions to ask them? And the answer is not a lot at all. Right. I go into a lot of these interviews with the intent of, I just want to be very intentional about listening to what they have to say. Right. And to me, the best questions are going to come organically. They're going to give you the answers, or they're going to give you the best questions to ask based off of what they're saying. Right. So for example, like you talked about, like learning how to pivot and ask the right questions. If I'm asking you, Peter, like, your best financial advice, right? Which is, you start with, broader questions. It's not necessarily like a specific great question to ask, right, but you get like a broad sense of where you're thinking. So if I ask you, Peter, what's the best financial advice you've ever been given? And you say something along the lines of like how important it is to be patient, right? And you just talk about patience. Well, then my follow-up is like, why do you think so many people struggle with delayed gratification, right? Like, because if you're talking about patience, well, okay, man, I want to dive deeper. How did you get that delayed gratification, right? And like, so I think that a lot of it just comes from genuinely just listening, and you're going to ask the best questions organically if you can listen to people and be very intentional about listening in your conversations.
People very often when they're in a conversation are just waiting for them to say the next thing they're going to say. Right. And they're cutting themselves off from listening what the response is. It's a give and take. When you do an interview, I want to be learning from you and you want to be learning from me, as opposed to me just talking and talking and talking. Yeah. But I find, I've learned so many different things from some of the, the most wonderful people that you've spoken to. Or like, you'll walk up to a group of people. I mean, everyone's going to always ask, like, are these set up interviews, or how do you know who the billionaires are and the billionaires are, and how do you do that?
Yeah. So I mean, a lot of our interviews have definitely been set up over the last couple of years for sure. And like, I admit that I'll tell anybody that, like anybody, but there's still a very much a strong percentage of them that are very organic and not set up. What I'll typically do is like if I'm coming to New York City, I may set up 2 or 3 interviews. For example, tomorrow I'm interviewing Mark Lohr, who's the owner of the Minnesota Timberwolves. He sold a company to Walmart for $3.3 billion, sold a company to Amazon for $500 million. So like, if I have 1 or 2 interviews set up in a city, great. The rest of the time, I'm going to be spending out filming on Wall Street for a couple hours, going to, like finding the wealthiest areas in different cities and going up to people or groups of people and whatnot. So a lot of the content is organic. Some of them are set up, definitely.
When you've been talking to a number of the, look at this, some of these are nondescript people who have made just lots of money, right? And I know that, you always ask them that, you always say, as I said before, we learn so much more from failure than from success. And I think one of the things that I've seen, which is a thread through a lot of the interviews, is that most of the billionaires are self-made billionaires. Sure. They did not come from money, right? And that along the way, have you ever been broke? That's one of your questions, right? I mean, the top 3 questions for you are, when did you become a millionaire? Mm-hmm. Have you ever been broke? And how much did you make in your biggest year, right? Which are really, those are important questions, right? They do set the stage for the interview. And I think it's really important to note, because having been broke, there's that line, Jordan Belfort, who I'm not a fan of, always said, I've been rich and I've been poor, and it's surely better to be rich, right? I mean, somebody who has been, when you interviewed me, I talked about my struggle. I talked about 2006, 7, and 8, when I came to work and wasn't making a penny, right? And I just faked it, right? I came in every day, I suited up, I showed up, I came to work. Nobody knew I wasn't making any money, because I knew that no opportunity was going to find me, cowering under the covers because my business had failed, and I was going through a spiritual quandary at the time. But, it's, think back to some of the interviews of people who have very often it will be those moments where we hit a bottom and then the bottom falls out of the bottom. And that's where we kind of have to that's where we start to dig and we find our soul and our resilience, our spiritual resilience, to go on to a bigger calling.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy, right? Like this idea that a lot of these people, again, I'll use Arthur Blank as the example just because, he's somebody that, I recently just interviewed and he's top of mind, but, he was fired from his job at 36 years old and he still ended up building Home Depot into a company that's now worth $350 billion. Right. So I think that anybody just needs to realize that, look, adversity is inevitable no matter what business that you're in. Like you just said, a lot of these billionaires are self-made. Sure, a lot of them came from money or had, certain people that helped out. But I mean, a lot of them, even if they, came from money to kind of get to that point, it's like, they weren't able to pioneer the money that they were given or that they were left with necessarily, and so I also look at it, even if people came from a couple $1,000,000 or whatnot, if they were able to turn that into something crazy, it's like good for them. Yeah. And also like, I don't think we should necessarily look down on people that do come from money because like, I don't know about you, but like, I want to, be able to make sure that my, kids have a good foundation. And if I leave them a company to take over one day, whatever that may be, whether it's a media empire or something else, then great. But, nonetheless, I just don't think that people should necessarily be looked down upon.
I agree totally. I was reminded the other day by, so one of the things, my specialty on the floor is IPOs, right? Initial public offerings. And I'm sort of the guy that, that's the New York Stock Exchange. One of the things that they do incredibly well is that price discovery. We are, our differentiator from NASDAQ is that we do IPOs better than any other platform. And so that is, that the IPO is the day that after a long journey and a long road show that a company that probably started in a garage with a little idea and grew over the years and they've come around and they've raised capital and they're going to start the beginning of this journey of being a publicly traded company. That's the greatest day of their life, right? Is when those founders and those creatives come down to the floor of the stock exchange and they are about to launch and become very wealthy people. And so I'm usually right there in the room where it happens, right? And I usually spend hours with these people. And sometimes it's a very stressful situation. Sometimes the stock, the stock has had a bit of a struggle to get to going public, or it was priced at $32 and there's not a lot of interest right now and it's looking $28. It's looking lower and they're all kind of upset and they're kind of freaked out. And I'm reminded of Jack Ma. Right? Jack Ma, CEO of Alibaba, right? He and I bonded because we were both very short. And so we were in this incredible crowd. It was one of the largest IPOs in history, right? 298 million share deal, I think was one of the biggest ones. And great story about Jack Ma.
I thought he was a giant. He's
5'3".
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
okay.
He's tiny like me. I'm 2 inches taller than him. And, but an amazing person who asked 22 times to borrow $5,000 to start a business and was turned down 21 times out of it until he was finally, somebody had enough faith in him to give him $5,000 to start the company. And on the day he went public, he made $328 billion. Right. And so, thinking back to some of the great interviews, what were some of the most, inspiring to you? Just making a lot of money is not enough of an inspiration, but people who really, I think that's an important factor for you is how people give back. Right. I think that's a big deal. You obviously talk about, right? You say, what's the best advice you want to give to the next generation? But for you, of all the things that people have told you about their best advice for the next generation, what is one that just sort of sticks out for you?
Very, very good question. When you talked about kind of like inspiring the idea of giving back, just two people off the top of my mind. Greg Perlman, who I recently interviewed, he's a billionaire out in Los Angeles. He's pledging to give away like 75% of his money to help the communities and all the charities and the hospitals and whatnot that he's in. I think that's like very powerful. Another one, John Caldwell, who's a British billionaire worth a couple $1 billion, very similar situation to me. Just the stuff that he's doing with the charities to help younger kids that are sick and whatnot is like very inspiring and impactful to see. I think in regards to some advice to the younger generation, I think one of the messages that have resonated the most with me in the last couple of years in growing this channel is this concept that credibility kills all bad attitudes. The reason
Explain that.
Yeah, credibility kills all bad attitudes. I think that, especially like if you're a young person and you're coming up in a competitive industry, oftentimes, there may be some older people that may look down upon you because you don't have enough gray in your hair, right? Mm-hmm. And I know that you're somebody who's really embraced that concept of reverse mentorship, where you don't look at the youth as like, oh, this person's young, they don't have anything to offer or whatnot. But credibility kills all bad attitudes. Like, there are interviews now that I've done today and in the last couple months that a year ago they were a rejection or they were a no. But why did those interviews happen now? Well, it's because we built ourselves into the brand. If you build it, they will come.
Right.
I'm a firm believer in that. Kendra Scott was the first time that I ever heard that in one of my interviews. And she's the jewelry mogul. And she talks about how at the beginning, nobody would give her money to help her with her jewelry business. But when she started to have lines around her stores, then all the private equity and venture capital firms were lining up to come and try and give her money and get in. If you build it, they will come. Credibility kills all bad attitudes. Like, you have to go through a period of understanding that there's a lot of people that, again, in my case, maybe didn't want to do an interview with me, didn't want to pour into me and whatnot. But I kind of use that as fuel and motivation to go out there and keep on building myself into the brand that would eventually attract all the right people to come to us.
It's curious because few people turn you down, right? I mean, I know that people always have the gatekeepers around them.
Yeah, definitely.
And you have an amazing ability to break through those guys. I'm sure I'm sure you've come close to guys, virtually like grabbing you by the throat and saying, guys,
definitely.
Get it. Haven't you?
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm sure. Look, I think about, the Sharks, for instance. I mean, it's amazing. I'm a firm believer that there's nobody that, does not have something. There are jewels. One of my lines is that I've learned some of the most powerful things in my life from the most unlikely sources. Right? It's not just because some guy has a bunch of money or some guy's done this that his advice is going to be great to me. Like we started this conversation with. If I'm not going to willing to change places with this person, why am I going to take advice from them? But it's so powerful to hear the messaging of so many people. Like you listen to Mark Cuban. It wasn't Mark Cuban one of your, tell me about that. He was one of your one of the earlier pivotal interviews.
That was
Describe, because he's a self-made man. I mean, he comes immigrant family and whatnot. Describe that one.
That was the first billionaire that I had ever done.
Really?
I was like 2022, so about a year into growing our channel, and I just saw him outside during
in Austin, South by Southwest.
Yeah, he had been speaking at an event and whatnot, and I turned to my brother because it was me and him that were filming together at the time, and I was like, yo, that's Mark Cuban. And for a second, there was a bit of us that was like a little hesitant and kind of like, worrisome. Like, oh, what if he says no? What if he says no? But that's right there. The worst thing somebody can say is no.
Is no.
And then you're in the exact same place that you were before even trying to even make it happen. Yeah. So I do think that a lot of people need to embrace this idea of it. And here's really a good guiding principle for everybody, any generation that you're in, because I don't think that, I just interviewed an 89-year-old billionaire, a tobacco billionaire out in California, and he was talking about how he was just meeting with a 70-year-old friend, and his 70-year-old friend is like, man, I can finally retire now. And he's going to him like, you're just starting. You know what I mean? But so that's why I said I don't necessarily even like just catering advice to specifically only the younger generation, but this idea of take the risk or lose the chance. Take the risk or lose the chance. 100%. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't, then opportunities are going to go if you don't take advantage of those risks when they're right in front of you.
You will regret it, and you will be sitting there. I mean, that I've lived I don't know if I've lived my whole life that way, but to sit there and wonder, right, of what's going on and not take that chance. Taking the chance is absolutely one of the key things. Yeah. I love that. Describe to me, and we can soon wrap this up, but describe to me, you always talk about that the platform is for the next generation. Mm-hmm. How are you gauging what people are, I know that everybody who watches your channel just absolutely loves it, and it's riveting because we love listening to people who have made money. Some people do it as entertainment. Some people do it as education, right? I find, your interviews incredibly educational for me, right? I want to know, right? The more I want to know from somebody who's walked the walk and talked the talk, right? I don't need somebody who's just making stuff up and they read it in a book and whatnot. Somebody who's lived through that experience, right? That's why, I'm a firm believer in, that's why I've decided to give back. I have 41 years of experience on the floor of the stock exchange, having grown I'm about to write a book. I just got a book deal a couple of weeks ago.
Congratulations.
And because I've had a lot of experience. It's all about experience, right? And how the response that you get for younger people, describe it to me.
Yeah. When you say like the response that we get from younger people per se, it's amazing. I mean, we have people in all 7 continents, countries all around the world that will reach out and just talk about like the different messages that have like resonated with them. And that's honestly, I don't know about you, but like one of the biggest things that once you like makes you want to keep on going. You're like, man, we have this community and people that are consuming your content, and some of them often rely on it as well as kind of like a source of like hope for them. And the amount of times where like people kind of stop me and say that it's like, hey, going through a tough time in my business right now, I really needed this message, and just all of that like is incredibly moving and impactful on us. Like, we know the impact that we're causing in other people, but it's also like knowing that it's like that's what it's doing, and that's the way that it's taking its course. It's like it keeps us motivated to just keep on going, keep creating, and know that there's like a lot more to continue to do.
Yeah, and as I said, I never really read comments of interviews that I've done, but with the interview we did, there were thousands, right? It was I think it was 5 million comments, right? The most you ever had, and I was just curious because I wanted to know what impact I was having, and it was amazing to hear how young people are watching it, and all different people are listening. They listen, right? They're listening to what we were talking about. They were listening to the message, and it blew my mind. I went down the rabbit hole, and it was really moving for me because it's this is a new thing for me. Like I started out my career on Wall Street, and then obviously social media sort of happened, and obviously my whole recent explosion since October. Right after I did the iShow Speed interview, you came along, right? And so you have really contributed to my going from 250 to 1.2 million and my engagement and whatnot. So I'm grateful for that, and it's been really wonderful knowing you. What's next?
Just continuing to just dominate in the media space, continuing to double down on distribution. We just launched 2 different channels that we have: Hard Knocks Women, Hard Knocks Business. So I'm going to continue to keep on just building out like all the different
pigeonholing it a little more.
We're bringing in different talent to run different channels, and so we're just trying to continue to just build and just grow things as big as they possibly can be.
Amazing. So look, ladies and gentlemen, you have James DeMoulin, who is really one of the most inspirational young people in the media space, and I'm honored to know you and call you my friend.
Likewise, brother. I appreciate you having me on, and it's always good to see you whenever I'm in New York.
It's great, and I really look forward to really good things ahead because there's so much more to do.
Likewise,
right?
brother.
As you said, I'm not 25 years old, but I'm just getting started.
Yeah.
And as are you. And so I'm glad to be on the journey with you.
Thank you, brother. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Live from the New York Stock Exchange, the Einstein of Wall Street, and James DeMoulin School of Hard Knocks. Go check it out.